Everyone, I'm Kevin Nelson. Here's a look at what's going on this week in the news. We begin with news from the Vatican. The Vatican has released Pope Francis's message for the World Day of the Poor. The message was dated June 13th, the feast of St. Anthony of Padua, patron saint of the poor, but it was made public on June 14th. The recently established World Day of the Poor will be marked each year on the 33rd Sunday of Ordinary Time, and this year we'll focus on a verse from Psalm 34. Rome Reports has more on the message and the events planned for the day.
The Vatican has presented the second annual World Day of the Poor, scheduled to take place this year on Sunday, November 18th. The slogan for this edition is a psalm verse. This poor man called out, and the Lord heard him. Pope Francis is urging all Christians to combat indifference to the suffering and marginalization of the most needy. It's a cultural aspect in which we view ourselves narcissistically that affects us and doesn't lead to an existence of joy, participation, or responsibility. There are a few changes this year. First, in the week leading up to the celebration, the poor will once again be offered free medical assistance in St. Peter's Square. However, in an effort to reach more people, the tent hospital will remain open later into the evening. Many poor people live at night. They're the people of the night. Thus, we have to reflect this in our tent hospital to provide them with a unique experience of participation and attention. In addition, following a Mass with the poor in St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Francis will have lunch with some of them in the Paul VI Audience Hall. This year, the Holy Father has doubled the number of invitees, as 3,000 needy are being welcomed to share a meal with him. The World Day of the Poor was instituted by Pope Francis in 2017 to provide aid for the disadvantaged in the Eternal City and spread awareness worldwide.
Looking now at news from around the country, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' Spring General Assembly took place this past week and was seen here on Catholic TV. During the meeting, the bishops approved the production of a short letter to inspire prayer and action regarding public life and a short video and other resources that would apply the teaching of Pope Francis to contemporary issues. The actions are meant to clarify the bishops' document on Catholics in public life, forming consciences for faithful citizenship. The bishops traditionally have issued updated versions of the faithful citizenship document about a year before a presidential election. Other actions during the meetings included approval of a new document focused on guiding the American Church in addressing the pastoral needs of Asian and Pacific Island Catholics, approval of revised guidelines governing Catholic and non-Catholic healthcare partnerships, and approval of changes in language to clarify several sections of the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People. The bishops also heard presentations on the fifth Encuentro, the Synod of Bishops on Young People, the Faith and Vocational Discernment, and it was also announced that a planned pastoral letter addressing racism is on schedule for a vote during the November General Assembly. More news from the Vatican. The 15th century copy of a letter Christopher Columbus sent to his royal patrons describing the riches of the New World has been returned to the Vatican with the help of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. The rare 4-page document, estimated to be worth $1.2 million, had been secretly replaced with a forgery, while the true document eventually ended up in the hands of a U.S. collector from Atlanta. Callista Gingrich, the U.S. ambassador to the Holy See, and representatives of the Department of Homeland Security presented the original copy during a ceremony June 14th at the Vatican Library.
This 525-year-old letter written by Christopher Columbus is now being returned to the Vatican by U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See Callista Gingrich after years of only having a forged copy. The letter about the recently discovered islands was published by Columbus in 1493 to share his discoveries about the Western Hemisphere. The letter had belonged to Giovanni di Rossi, who donated his personal books to the Vatican Library in 1854. However, they didn't arrive until 1921. Later in 2004, American collector David Parsons had unknowingly purchased the original letter. It was examined in 2013 by Homeland Security art investigators, and Parsons' widowed wife voluntarily returned it to the Vatican.
And of course, we want special recognition to the Mrs. Mary Parsons for her gracious decision to return this book.
The U.S. Embassy officials met with the Vatican to explain that Parsons' copy had previously been sold to a book dealer in New York by a notorious Italian book thief, Marino De Caro. The timing is not confirmed, but De Caro is now serving 7 years in jail for stealing around 4,000 books and manuscripts from Italian libraries.
Columbus's first voyage to the Americas, the Italian explorer documented his findings and his assessment of these new lands in a letter to his patrons. The original letter, written in Spanish in 1493, was then immediately translated into other languages. The original Spanish letter no longer exists, but about 80 of these early printed translations still survive, such as the one that had belonged to the Vatican, which is a Latin version printed in 1493. And finally in the news, the Overseas Aid Agency of the Bishops of England and Wales is warning that the Saudi-led coalition's assault on Hodeida, Yemen's main port city, will have a catastrophic impact on the ability of relief groups to get food, medicine, and other aid to vulnerable Yemeni families in urgent need of assistance. Yemeni government forces, backed by Saudi-led coalition warplanes and ships, began to pound Hodeida June 13th in the biggest battle of the 3-year war between several Gulf Arab states and the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. The coalition aims to retake the Houthi-held city, which is a key aid hub. Giovanni Reda, the agency's head of humanitarian programs for the Middle East, said the hunger affects 17 million people, which is 60% of the Yemen population. She said with 90% of all Yemen's food imports passing through Hodeida, any disruption to the port's operation will affect the entire country. The charity Save the Children has said some 300,000 children in the area are at risk. Well, that is all the information we have for you this time. I'm Kevin Nelson. Don't forget, you can keep up to date on Catholic news throughout the week with Catholic Newsbreak right here on the Catholic TV network.